So, while I was watching Frieren Beyond Journeys and enjoying its great animation and amazing story, I decided to delve into what type of immortality elves in this world have and help viewers who don't understand how immortality works and the various types there are in fiction and media in general. So first off, we're going to be starting at the very beginning and list out the different types of immortality that appear in stories together with the differences between them. So I'm only going to be talking about the basic and common types of immortality, not the ones that have complicated mechanics behind them like cloning or consciousness hopping. So immortality in media usually stems from either 2 or 3 versions that people usually look at, which are regeneration, invulnerability, and eternal life. So let me explain regeneration. So a good example of this type of immortality is shown by someone like Deadpool, who is constantly healing and is able to grow body parts and even survive from a single atom. This type of immortality is the most overpowered since there's practically nothing that is able to truly stop the character like Deadpool, as he will always keep coming again and again, no matter how much torture and pain they are subjected to. So the next type of immortality that I'll cover is invulnerability. So invulnerability usually comes paired with eternal life as well. So this type of immortality allows the user to have a body that is impenetrable so that no external attacks will cause any damage to the body. This would mean that the character can take any amount of damage and attacks and still keep going without any scratches inflicted upon them, as if nothing even happened. And next is eternal life. So eternal life is the type of immortality we see characters like elves from Lord of the Rings like Legolas have, and even most vampires are depicted to have this. This type of immortality essentially means that the character's life can span up to an unlimited amount, which means that they are unable to grow old and are unable to die from old age, but are still vulnerable and can die from fatal attacks inflicted upon them. So these are the 3 most common types of immortality there are in fiction, and in order for us to be able to determine which type of immortality that Frieren and the rest of the elves in the story of Frieren Beyond Journeys and have, we'll have to look at all the available descriptions and conversations that has been said and revealed throughout the story thus far. So this meant that I had to go through all 122 chapters that is currently released at the time of this recording. So with that, let me go through it and determine if Frieren is truly immortal. I'll begin from the start and go through it as the story allows us to learn Frieren's perspective on the passage of time and how she views it. So from the very first chapter, we can see the contrast between how the party members of the hero party view life compared to Frieren, and their need to decide what to do next after the end of their journey due to the limited time they have in life, which heightens the sense of urgency to make use of the time that they are given. We also get to see the party members reminisce about the 10 years they have spent together journeying throughout the lands with the goal of defeating the Demon King. But however, Frieren comes in and says that it was just a short journey, making it seem like to her, it felt like it could have been equivalent to how humans perceive a week or a month, or maybe even less. We even lead to the party members viewing the once every 50 years meteor shower, where Frieren says that she will bring them to a better viewing spot the next time the meteor shower happens, which will happen in another 50 years. And upon hearing this, Himmel just laughs at the offer and agrees that they should all go watch the next one together, despite knowing that the next time, he will be an old man by then, and it's not even guaranteed whether he'll be alive or not. Hater even states that they don't know how long Frieren's been alive for, and they would not be able to understand how she feels, since despite 50 or 100 years being a long time for humans, Frieren probably just sees it as another day. So from this, we know that at least Frieren has a really long lifespan, or maybe even an eternal lifespan. So, as we see 50 years pass and Frieren returning to the town, we meet the party members again and see that they are all, of course, 50 years older. while Frieren remains the same, like how she did 50 years ago. And even as the story continues, we as the readers will realize that she has stayed having the same appearance from over 1,000 years ago, and probably even longer than that. So we know that in the story, other races have long lifespans as well, such as the dwarves and demon races. However, for the dwarves like Eisen, their average lifespan lasts for about 300 years. And for the demon races, we don't really know how long they last, but we know that they can live for a really long time, just like the elves, for probably a few thousand years. And one of the first instances where we see one of the notable demons in the story is when Frieren unsealed the demon Qual, and they talk about how 80 years is a short time from their perspective because of their long lifespans. We can also confirm with certainty that elves live for much longer compared to dwarves, as there is a conversation where Frieren says that once upon a time she visited the Vol Basin, and Eisen even wonders what the phrase once upon a time would even mean for someone like Frieren who has lived for an immensely long time. However, at least we do get to know that Frieren isn't millions of years old, since Fern made a comment that Frieren visited the Vol Basin in the Paleolithic age, which Frieren says that she is obviously not that old. But of course, that doesn't mean that she couldn't live for a million years. It's just confirmation that she hasn't. So as the chapter continues, we learn that Frieren's master, the great mage Flemme, planted a tree more than 1,000 years ago, and we see a flashback where Frieren sees the moment Flemme plants the sapling and claims that it will grow and protect the area even for 1,000 years, and even makes a prediction that one day, Frieren will come back to this tree to receive some guidance from her master, Flemme. And from this flashback, we see Frieren look the same as how she does in the current time, confirming that Frieren can easily live for more than thousands of years. And after this, we even see a conversation where Frieren says that the 10-year journey to defeat the Demon King didn't even manage to cover 1/100th of her life. So throughout the story, we keep getting conversations where we learn more about the mage Flemme and understand that from the perspective of a human, the mage Flemme, despite being known as the one who created and spearheaded the magic of humanity, is also regarded as a fairy tale, and Hater even states that even he doesn't know if the real one existed or not, which is due to the amount of fake grimoires that was claimed to have been made from Flemme herself. So throughout the story, Frieren rarely talks about other elves and even herself, but we do get a few information about them from the small amounts of information that she gives, where we learn that even for her, she has only seen a handful of elves, which is due to the elves viewing the feelings of affection and reproductive instinct as inferior, which is leading them to extinction. So this tells us that in the story, elves are able to die, and that in this story, they do not have the regenerative immortality or invulnerability, since they are capable of death. But it remains to be seen whether they can die of old age or not. So another instance where the characters talk about aging is when Himmel states that unlike Frieren, the rest of the parties have transient lives, and with a quick simple Google search, we know that it basically means temporary, which would also imply that Frieren's life is not temporary but will last eternally. Next, we get to see the moment that Flemme and Frieren meet for the first time. So Flemme comes across a destroyed elven village, and we learn that the only survivor left is Frieren, who was the only one there who was powerful enough to defeat all the demons that attacked, but was on the verge of death herself. And even at this point in time, Frieren's looks is still the same, which could mean that she and the rest of the elves in the village has been living there for a few thousand years before the village was destroyed. Because we know from the story that the Demon King rise to power and viewed the elves as the one who posed the most threat to him, leading to him proceeding to wipe out the elven villages first, which would mean that Frieren has been alive even before the Demon King rise to power. And throughout the 122 chapters, the majority of the things we learn about the elves is that they perceive time differently, and that nothing ever stays the same, which means that for them, there is no point in trying to get anything done anyway. So as the story continues, we eventually meet the first elf aside from Frieren, and this elf is named Kraft, who is a monk who had thought that the rest of the elves had gone extinct. It is also interesting to add that despite living for thousands of years, both Frieren and Kraft have never heard of one another, and when asked what he is implying by bringing it up, Kraft just says that we are elves, which probably has the meaning that elves, no matter how influential they become, will eventually be forgotten. Which makes sense to me because in a different chapter, we learn that Kraft used to be a hero in the past, had a statue of himself and a friend made, but despite achieving something that was grand, he was forgotten, which would likely happen to Frieren as well in the future, despite being in the party that defeated the Demon King. Another moment where we can have an indication of Frieren having eternal life comes from Mage in the first class Mage exam, where she states that elves are seriously immortal, referring to eternal life of course. We also meet another elf called Sere, who is Flemme's master and is known to have knowledge of every grimoire in existence, and she makes that statement over 1,000 years before the current events of the story, meaning that she is much older than even Frieren is, and is implied to be much more powerful and possesses a large amount of mana that even Frieren can't compare to, since we know that Frieren has been restricting her mana ever since she met Flemme, and now other mages see her mana as if it is equivalent to an old experienced mage. However, when we see Sere and her mana, it is immense and looks like how Frieren's does when she removes her restrictions on her mana. However, when Fern meets Sere, she is able to see the fluctuations coming from Sere's mana, which means that the immense amounts of mana that is coming from Sere is the amount that is available to be seen while she is restricting her mana, implying that the real amount of mana that she has is much more immense than what is being seen, which of course leads us to believe that she has been restricting her mana for a long time, even longer than Frieren. So we see a flashback where Sere and Frieren are talking, and she says that they have all the time in the world and tells Frieren that their time is near infinite. So this basically confirms that elves in this story have eternal life. And we also learn from a conversation between Frieren and another elf called Milliard that elves usually go on quests during their perennial lives to at least have some kind of purpose of goal in their lives, because if not, they will just live on a boring life with no purpose. And with a quick Google search again, we can find out that perennial means that they have a permanent or perpetual life. So after reading all this, I safely came to the conclusion that the elves in Frieren Beyond Journeys End have immortality that gives them eternal life and live on perpetually based on all the evidence that has been given in the story. However, they can still die fatal attacks and injuries, just like what happened in the elven village that Frieren is from. So in conclusion, yes, Frieren is truly immortal and will not die from old age and will remain looking the same for as long as she lives. So after all that reading and editing, I'll now go and lie down and see you all next time. Bye bye.